Welcome back to a linguistic approach to English grammar. In this video, we're going to introduce noun phrases. And remember, a phrase is a group of at least one word that acts as a unit. So we'll start off with some very basic noun phrases that consist of just one word. So we'll start by saying that a noun phrase must have a noun, proper noun, or pronoun head. We haven't discussed the different types of pronouns there are, but we will see pronouns take up the same position. So for instance, suppose I have a noun officer. Well, officer is a noun, so we labeled a noun. And if we have a noun, it must build up into its own noun phrase. So because there's just one word in this noun phrase, it just consists of an. If we have a proper noun such as Fred, then once again, Fred is a proper noun. All nouns must build up into a noun phrase. So this is a noun phrase consisting of just one word, Fred. Lastly, a pronoun like him, even though we don't give it the N label on the word itself, a pronoun is a type of noun, effectively. So this builds up into a noun phrase. Now, I should be clear here, if you are familiar with syntax, you would call this what's called a determiner and build this up into a determiner phrase. For this grammar series, we are avoiding determiner phrases because not all theories use determiner phrases. Many theories just stick with noun phrases. So if you're not familiar with that, don't worry about it. If you are familiar with syntax, just be aware these are the conventions I'm taking. Okay. So we saw this in the last one. Noun phrases are modified by adjective phrases. So if we have something like a lucky winner, I pointed it out here, the noun phrase consists of the noun winner, and it also consists of the adjective phrase. And what this means here, after the colon here, so we have adj colon mod, we can think of this as a function. So the function is modifier. That's what it's doing. It's modifying winner. So the adjective phrase consisting of the adjective lucky is modifying winner. So we know what type of winner it was. Oh, it was a lucky winner. Say we have an exam. So exam is a noun. It has to build up into a noun phrase. But say we want to ask, well, what type of exam was it? Well, we can introduce the adjective phrase modifier, somewhat difficult. So this adjective phrase modifier consists of a degree word somewhat, an adjective difficult, and somewhat difficult as a unit describes what the exam was like. So that's the type of exam it is. It is a somewhat difficult exam. We're also able to modify noun phrases with other noun phrases to form compounds. Now, the rules for this are much stricter, and it's very hard to even communicate what the rules are because these essentially are words that are built from independent phrases. So there are multiple different ways of doing these trees and showing this structure. One way would be to have a noun phrase that just consists of two independent ends. We're not going to use this because it's difficult to tell what the main noun is and what the modifying noun is. So instead, we'll use the structures I have listed above. So for instance, assume we have the word like blood pressure. Well, pressure is really what we're talking about here. And blood is specifying the type of pressure, blood pressure. So we have pressure as our main noun. So this is the noun that builds up into its own noun phrase. And then instead of, say, taking an adjective phrase as a modifier, we can take another noun phrase as a modifier. So the noun blood, this is a noun, builds up into its own noun phrase. And then we use this noun phrase, blood, to modify pressure and give us more details about what type of pressure we're talking about. Here's another example with police officer. So yeah, what are we talking about when we say police officer? The main piece of information is that this person is an officer. Now, what type of officer? Well, police is a noun. It can also be a verb, but in this case, when we build compounds, typically we use the noun form. This noun police builds up into its own noun phrase, and this noun phrase is functioning as a modifier for officer. So it's giving more information. What type of officer are we talking about? Oh, a police officer. Okay, so one question I've gotten a lot when I teach a course like this in person is how do we compare a noun phrase modifier and an adjective phrase modifier? because they look the same and the structure is pretty much the same. It's just the phrase that's different. So here I have chemistry teacher and smart teacher. Now, what you notice about smart here, this is a typical adjective. You can say the smart teacher, the teacher is smart, the teacher looks smart. You can use this as an adjective. So this builds into an adjective phrase that modifies teacher. So what kind of teacher? Oh, a smart teacher. With chemistry teacher, this is definitely not an adjective. So we cannot say the teacher was chemistry or the teacher was chemistry-ish. We cannot do things with the word chemistry that we can do with typical adjectives. The chemistry word here functions as a noun. It is a noun. So chemistry gets the noun label, it builds up into a noun phrase, and that noun phrase modifies teacher. So what type of teacher? So what's important to see here between these two cases is that they have the same function. They are both acting as modifiers for teacher, but the categories are different. So remember, categories depend on a few things: the meaning, the distribution, and also the different types of morphemes they can take. So can you add the plural s? Can you add a suffix like ish to make something like cute-ish, blue-ish, chemistry-ish? Oh, that doesn't work. Linguistics-ish, police-ish. You know, these cases are definitely not as clear-cut as the ones for smart-ish, small-ish, happy-ish. So our noun phrases can take noun phrase modifiers or adjective phrase modifiers. We can also have multiple modifiers. So say we have nice warm chocolate cookie. Now we're using a simpler structure here. So if it was a syntax course, we'd want everything just to have two branches. But for the sake of demonstration, these really don't come out any different here. So we have nice warm chocolate cookie. In fact, let's take a different approach here. Let's start from the bottom. So what is nice? Nice is an adjective. Warm is an adjective. Chocolate, well, chocolate can be an adjective, but let's just treat it as a noun here, because it's not like a tasty cookie or delicious cookie. We can say it's a chocolate cookie. We can eat chocolate. I'm assuming actually you could call it either or, depending on who you take the course with, if you're taking this course in person. But for our purposes, you can treat it as a noun or an adjective. The interpretation is not going to be any different. And then cookie is a noun. So the first question we have is, what is the head noun of this sentence? In other words, what words could we remove to get the same idea about what we're talking about? Well, we're talking essentially about a cookie, right? So there's my chocolate chip cookie. So this is really what we're talking about. So this is, I shouldn't say main, I should call this is the head noun of the sentence. So we want the head noun to attach directly to the highest noun phrase. Okay, so now we have all of these other words, so each adjective has to be built into its own adjective phrase. Each noun has to build up into its own noun phrase, and these are all acting as modifiers. So we're saying the cookie is nice. We're saying the cookie is warm. We're saying the cookie is chocolate. So all three of these words and phrases are independently modifying cookie. So we can have a noun phrase that looks nasty like this. Again, some syntacticians and grammarians will make the structure a little bit different, but for the purposes of interpretation and for the purposes of understanding how these things work, having 4 branches come from a noun phrase is perfectly fine. So let's build some more trees. As always, you can pause the video and try to do them yourself, but let me just do these here. So let's start with cool fish tank. Well, we're talking about a tank, right? That's like the main noun of the sentence. So this will build up into the highest noun phrase. Now we're talking about a cool fish tank. So are we talking about a tank for cool fish? Or are we talking about a fish tank that happens to be cool? Well, we're going to talk about the fish tank that happens to be cool. So fish is another noun that builds up into a noun phrase, and this is acting as a modifier. So what type of tank is it? It's a fish tank. Cool is an adjective, which builds up into an adjective phrase, and that is also acting as a modifier, so that also attaches to the noun phrase. So tank is the head of the noun phrase, and it has two modifiers. It has fish as a modifier, and it has tank as a modifier. Okay, let's try new cheap pencil sharpener. So what are we talking about? We're talking about a sharpener. So this will be the head of our noun phrase. And if you've noticed, the thing on the right is usually the head of what we're talking about, especially the NPs. So pencil is another noun, cheap is an adjective, and new is also an adjective. So every adjective has to build into its own adjective phrase. All nouns have to build into their own noun phrase, and these are all acting as modifiers for the word sharpener. So we have pencil talking about what kind of sharpener it is, cheap talking about what kind of sharpener it is, and new talking about what kind of sharpener it is. So that's how we're building trees. If I was being totally pedantic here, I would write modifier on all of these things, but of course this is not a necessity. This is just used for illustrative purposes. Now there's one more thing that can be inside noun phrases, and we haven't talked about it yet, but we will talk about it in the next few videos. And these are determiners. So things like the wall, this activity, my life. All of these different types of determiners, which we'll go over in the next few videos, can act as what are called specifiers of noun phrases. So this points out where in the world it is. I shouldn't say where, I should say it specifies which one it is. So when I say the wall, it is a particular wall that you know about. If I say this activity, it is an activity that is in front of us. If I say my life, I'm talking about whose life it is. I'm specifying who that life belongs to. So that will be in the next few videos.